What is the most outstandingly bad display of wealth you've ever personally seen? When I worked at Blue, Justin Bieber spent a stupid amount of money just to ski. He tried to rent the whole resort to make it private, but they wouldn't let him. This area also has dozens of houses that are all valued well over $10 million, which all sit empty. They're just buildings that billionaires bought on a whim. I had a friend in middle school whose parents paid for her and 3 of her friends, me included in that group, to go to Disneyland and stay at the Disneyland Hotel. At one point during the trip, I cried in a corner of a store because my mom could only give me $20 to spend and everyone else bought whatever they wanted the entire trip. I didn't know how insane it was for the parents to pay for all of our tickets and rooms until I was older. George Lucas is going to spend over $100 million to build affordable housing in an effort to piss off his neighbors who blocked him from building a studio. I saw a guy spend $44 billion on a social media company for the express purpose of throwing a temper tantrum. I was managing a wealthy family event. They gave me a cup of tea while I was outside. After the event, I went into the kitchen to throw the cup away. I asked the wife where the garbage was. She replied, "I don't actually know, I just leave it somewhere and people throw it for me." I went to Buckingham Palace at the beginning of September, blew my fucking mind how much gold and marble was just sitting there for a couple of people to live with. Meanwhile, a 5-minute walk away outside and there are homeless people begging for food. I worked at a convention center where Peter Nygard would hold his new clothing line releases. Part of the deal was one of the banquet staff had to be his gopher for the night. They literally had to stand behind his chair and he would hold up his hand and say, "Wine," and they'd have to refill his wine glass immediately, or any other demands he had. The good news though, he's in prison now for sex crimes. Gave me the creeps back then, so I'm not surprised. Years ago when my dad was in the military, we had some high-up members of the Saudi royal family visit the base for some kind of official trip for a few days. Showed up on their private jet and all that, to be expected. The odd part is that the guy's son came too. He was only in his 20s and wasn't involved in the meetings at all, so he essentially had 3 days to kill. So he went to the nearby Mercedes garage and bought an brand new SLK with all the options, in cash of course, and used it to get around for those 3 days, and when they left he just left the car with the keys in the car park of the junior ranks mess. I work as a programmer at a company. They pay me €5 an hour. One day I went to the company's parking and saw 2 Ferraris just sitting there. After I asked around, they told me they belonged to the CEO, but he doesn't even use them to come to the office. So he has 2 Ferraris collecting dust. My next door neighbor was a captain on a fancy yacht out of Miami. He had to go down and stay on the yacht for 3-month stints. I thought they were going out for long trips, but it turns out they were almost always at a dock. The owner doesn't even live in Florida. He said it was actively used for maybe 3 weeks a year. He and all the other crew were just there in case the guy decided he wanted to fly in and use the boat. It was fully stocked with fancy food at all times. The chef shopped for fresh stuff every 4 days so they could be ready at a moment's notice in case he showed up. He was paying the salaries of about 20 people year-round just so he could occasionally use his boat. Qatar spent apparently $380 billion for the World Cup. There are only 380,000 native Qataris. That's $1 million per citizen. The parents of this girl that went to my high school got her some average, probably $10,000 car for her 16th birthday. She gets all upset because it isn't what she wanted. Her parents then go, "Just kidding. This is the actual car we got you," and give her some approximately $70,000 Range Rover. She got to keep them both. I have a friend who was employed by a very famous old pop star. She lived on site at his mansion and was paid more than I am with no rent or bills for the said cottage. Her job was to open the curtains of his bedroom in the mornings, put on classical music and gently wake him up for the day. That sounds sexual, but it wasn't sexual, more like, "Hey big star, I know you're still sleepy but it's time to get up." My friend was on a working trip around the world and got a job in a very high-end cafe in Dubai. She served a customer who had been shopping and had lots of shopping bags around her feet. She asked the customer if she would like her to store them in the cloakroom for her, to which the customer relied, "Oh, you can have them all, I can't be bothered to carry them home." After making sure she wasn't joking, she stored the bags till after her shift ended. The next day she put in her best outfit and set off from the backpackers she was staying at and returned as many items to the stores as she could. She collected $25,000 in cash and another $4,000 in very posh credit notes. She had 2 items that she couldn't return and still has them 15 years later. A rich girl at my school was happy that someone stole her $1,500 purse because it gave her an excuse to get a new one from her dad. In my freshman year in college, a resident assistant offered to give me and a few friends a ride to the mall. To reach this mall you would need to get on the highway and at least be knowledgeable of big city traffic. So we asked him how long he had been driving because we did have other options. He went on to tell us that he had 5 years of driving experience but was a horrible driver. Who went on to say that the Range Rover he has now was his 6th car. And he totaled the previous 5 and his parents kept buying him cars. I was dumbfounded by the waste of money to keep getting this guy cars. A friend's dad owns one of those Fortune 500 companies. Dude's never had to think about money. I remember when we were in college he drove his $200,000 car to meet us at a party, got drunk and had his dad's driver come pick us all up, and left the car at the frat house like just forgot about it, didn't even think to go pick it up again. We thought he'd had someone pick it up and 2 months later he was notified that it had been towed and he had to pay to get it back. His response was, "I bought another one last week anyway." Worked at a suit store, think Men's Warehouse, but not that one. A guy comes in looking kinda schlubby, but there are no customers in the store so I go help him. Find some stuff he thinks is cool but ends up saying he wanted to check another place. No problem, it happens all the time. Comes back about an hour later and says that no one at the other store paid any attention to him, he says because he looked poor. He then proceeds to tell me he liked how I treated him with respect and proceeded to buy a full wardrobe from me. We're talking 10 plus custom suits at $1,000 plus each, 30 plus dress shirts, 30 plus ties, casual shirts, shorts, pants, shoes, the whole deal. Ended up ringing everything up and it was around $20K. I made a 10% commission on everything and that was the most money I as a broke college student ever gotten in a single paycheck. My boss had to impromptu get a new license to travel. When he was at the DMV they said he had to pay like $100,000 in back parking tickets. He just set a card down and paid it. Apparently, he couldn't get a parking permit to be able to park in front of his house for some BS reason, so he just parked there anyway, and just accepted that they were ticketing him like $100 a day for years. Hey, if you like the video so far, consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video for more. I used to work in a museum that rented out part of its building for special events like receptions or dinner parties. For one particular wedding reception, the bride strongly disliked the color of the walls in the large gallery where they wanted to have the reception. We refused her request to paint them a different color. The building is on a historic building register which precludes making most kinds of alterations without a metric ton of paperwork, even when she offered to pay to have the walls painted for the reception and then repainted afterwards. Her solution, instead, was to have a florist create walls of flowers to hang on portable frames in front of the walls. We never heard the exact cost of that, but the florist commented during the installation that it was the largest single order he had ever filled and it was about as much as his shop would sell in a year. A breakfast place I went to a lot in my hometown. I went to pay for my meal and the waitress was like, "Don't worry, it is covered." The next day, I went back and once again my meal was covered. That was repeated for the rest of a week and I was baffled. Apparently, some rich dude liked his breakfast a week ago and bought all orders for the following week and tipped all the staff $10,000 to keep it a secret and cover the loss of tips for the week. It was a small mom and pop shop, but that still has to have cost him $100,000 or something. You can share your own story down in the comment below, and thanks for watching the video.